I'm bored. Let's read a book. Oh! By nightfall, I cared a lot more. First freezing rain had come down nearly in sheets, gradually turning the rutted road into a surface as treacherous as glass. Like knives, the ice fragments slashed from the sky. The hills were steep enough to make climbing impossible, but not rocky enough to contain caves or outcroppings. In the end, I figured out what to do. Under a scrubby tree, next to a stone wall, I created something like light weaving, except that I kept out ice and water. Easy? Hardly. And with each rumble of thunder, I felt more drained, though I forced myself to keep eating and drinking, knowing that I needed the energy to hold together the weather net that sheltered Gerlach and me in a barren area, with but the marginal shelter of hedgerow and a short stone wall. He whinnied. Easy. I patted him for at least the 100th time. After the ice rain came to snow, thick and wet at first, then cold and fine. Keeping the finer flakes from us took less energy, but the time it was enough against the wall and brushy hedgerow to provide a natural barrier. That let me relax my net and build a fire. The warmth from the small blaze helped as I continued to weave a shelter and climbed into my bedroll. Gerlach's internal order and appearance indicated he was far more accustomed to hard weather than I. And finally I let go of the weather skiing and collapsed into sleep. He whinnied. The morning was gray, with the windy gusts blowing the lighter snow into the once clear area and all over but the warmest of the fire's ashes. Yeah! The shrill call of the vulcros jolted me awake. Through a half haze of fine snow, fog, and sleep, I lifted my head and wish I didn't, as a line of fire split my skull down the middle. Oh, mumbled a strange voice that resembled mine. The pain eased, but did not cease as I let my head rest on the quilted fabric of the bedroll. Sss. Even the whisper of the snow echoed like thunder through my skull. My arms ached more than just in the first days with Uncle Sardet, more than after Tamra's drubbing me, more than after even Gilberto's exercises. I wish whoever was moaning would stop, but that didn't happen until I realized I was the one doing the moaning. The noises kept on. Between the darned Volcro sitting on the hedgerow and Gerlach suggesting that it was either time to eat or get up, I eventually woke up and levered myself into a sitting position, not even high enough to see over the wall, and the snow drifted above it. My cheeks tingled from the cold, and ice crystals fell from the steam of my breath. The fire in my skull not only burned, the bones surrounding my brain felt like a smith's anvil, pounded by an unrelenting hammer. Thinking the water bottle might help, I reached through the powdery snow for it, ignoring the minor arm cramps I had until I had it, and dropped it. Of course the water was frozen solid. Fire was warm ashes, nothing more, and the light snow covered all but the center cinders. How long it took to get the fire started, who could tell? My fingers nearly froze. Since I had never replaced the leather gloves I had seared apart and friven, the branches I had broken set aside for fuel had frozen together. Gerlach wuffed and whinnied, and each wuff and whinny cut through my ears like a knife. My legs cramped at each movement, and the wind cut through my ears like a knife, flinging dirty, bitter flakes into my eyes whenever I really needed to see something. Order, use magic, was out. That is, if I didn't want to finish destroying my body, and it seemed impossible to get enough warmth to get some water and food into my system. On the other hand, I somehow doubted much of a search for me going on. Not for a while, so after much failing, the fire burned again, and I found a small package of pressed grain which I fed to Gerlach, except that I held it, half leaning against him while he ate it. In time, using the one battered skillet in the sack, I melted some of the snow, taking a few sips myself, but letting Gerlach have most of it. Then I ate what I'm not sure, but it didn't matter much, and crawled back into my bedroll. The fire was back to ashes when I woke again, and the sky was still covered with featureless gray clouds. The wind gusted, and my head still ached and burned. Gerlach whinnied. "I don't like it either," I mumbled. The flailing to re-establish the fire was about the same, since I had to stagger through knee-deep snow down to the hedgerow to find enough branches and sticks for fuel. But I was getting somewhere. Sitting by the fire, I ate some more, drank some more, and felt the headache subside a bit more. Clearly, we weren't traveling anywhere quickly, and there was no point in trying, not when the road ahead wasn't even visible except in the higher and more exposed places where the wind had swept the snow off in order to build waist-high drifts, if not higher, in the depressions. While I had no schedule to meet, we had not even reached the true base of the East Thorns. Was there any chance of crossing them? My eyes traveled to the southwest. Surprisingly, I could see the darkness of confiners on the lower slopes, as though the mountains had received less snow than the hills beneath them. I shivered and forced myself to eat another few mouthfuls of the travel bread. Then I told my reluctant body it was time to loosen up. Their protests were monumental enough that I had nearly lost what I had just eaten. So I leaned against Gerlach, my eyes damp with frustration. So darn unfair, but fairness sure as heck counted for nothing. So I kept moving, if more slowly, and melted some more snow for Gerlach, and gave him the rest for a grain cake. Half of Justin's sack was for him, and visions and provisions that never would have crossed my mind. As I struggled to lift the large canvas sack of provisions back onto Gerlach, I wondered how long it would take before I could see things in advance. I mean, there was nothing special about the provisions, just that some weighted and heavy gray canvas still filled almost to overflowing and represented a goodly portion of Justin's stocks. But in instance, while I was trying to escape Jellicoe, he had packed with more forethought than I had since I landed in Freetown. Justin, I already missed the Grey Wizard. Now all the choices were mine, and it had clearly become just how little I knew about the real world of Kandar. At the same time, Justin hadn't been that much better than my father, Tor, and Tamra, or half a dozen others who had more knowledge than I did, and I refused to share it. Each of them had given me enough for me to know there were unanswered questions, and said it was up to me to find answers. The Volcro was back, probably waiting for us to die, but I had a different idea. Finally, sometime after midday, under the featureless gray clouds that obscured the time, I swung up onto Gerlach and let him take his own place through the snow. He avoided the windswept areas, still icy, and made his way along the side of the road. Unlike me, he seemed to enjoy the ride. My guts ached, and while the headache had diminished to a dull pounding, my eyes burned and my hands trembled. Gerlach walked carefully, and I hung on, occasionally sipping from the water bottle I had tucked inside my cloak, now containing half ice and half water. Despite the gusts and the chill, I sweated and the dampness froze on my forehead, then seemed to freeze boil away. By mid-afternoon, as the sky darkened, the lower slopes of the East Thorns were closer, and the snow was only ankle-deep. More important, it had apparently not rained first, and there was little ice on the open spots in the rutted road. Gerlach still preferred walking in the lighter snow than on the frozen clay. The sweats had left me, as had the headache, replaced by a light-headedness and a feeling of weakness. I kept looking for somewhere to stop, but the hills had grown increasingly more barren and rocky as we trudged toward the lower slopes of the East Thorns, which now seemed to get no nearer. Meanwhile, it got darker, and I peered through the blowing snow as the wind froze, looking for another hedgerow, another sheltered spot, at least one out of the wind. Gerlach whinnied. "It goes for me, too." Night had not yet overtaken us, and we have traveled longer, but a darkish shape not too far off the road resolved itself into something, an abandoned hut, a way stop. Who could tell? I wasn't sure I cared. I risked trying to feel whether the place was disordered, and immediately recovering the headache I had almost forgotten about. The hut was chaos-free on all four sides, and it had a roof of sorts, made of slate shingles, though half were missing, as well as an open hearth beneath a hole in the roof. With no door and two oblong holes were shuttered windows. Had it been, was drafty indeed, but the remnants of the door and shutters were enough for a small fire to warm the space occupied by one tired young man and a strong pony. We ate and we slept, and in the morning it was merely cold, with the stray staffs of the sunlight peering through the breaking clouds and light gusts of chill air. Best of all, my headache was gone, though my back was sore and my muscles ached. In the warm darkness, it looked as though East Thorns had moved closer, as though I could reach out and touch the conifer-covered slopes of the foothills. That wasn't exactly right, but we did reach the road marker noting the road to Fenard by mid-morning, and by then we had reached the edge of where the recent snow had fallen. While there was snow under the trees, the occasional tracks on it, and the finger-width distance between its white and the brown of the tree trunks, told that the storm had attacked me and not reached the East Thorns. I shivered again at the thought, looking back over my shoulder, but saw no one and nothing on the road behind. I did wish I had possessed the ability to conceal Gerlach's tracks, but surviving the storm and cold had been hard enough. Not more than another K past the road marker, we passed a narrow stream that disappeared underground, right to the east of where we stood. Warmer than air, a fog rose from the water, and I let Gerlach drink as he would while I rinsed the canteen and washed my face and hands in the pleasantly chill flow. Before I'd finished washing, my friend and companion found some tufts of grass still partially green to nibble. For the first time since scrambling out of Jellicoe, I could peer into the supply sack provided by Justin while there was light enough to see. Even so, I almost missed the off-white square tucked between two oatcakes wrapped in the old paper. Folded into a square was the size of my hand, and it bore one word, Laris. My head was still swimming, and I didn't open it, but tucked it instead into my belt pouch and continued to search for another package of travel bread. I found it, and a small pouch of spiced dried apples. While I ate travel bread and dried apples, Gerlach alternated slurps of water from the not-quite-underground river with bites from the narrow stretch of grass, nurtured by the spray from the fast-moving water. Glancing overhead, I realized that the clouds seemed to be darkening and thickening once again, so I finished as my stomach would hold without rebelling and climbed back into the saddle. Then we started up the narrow road again, winding in and out of ever steeper hills, and at each turn I looked for a sign of other travelers or wayfarers' huts, or some shelter with one eye checking the sky visible in the space between the hills. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of my videos. See y'all in the next one. Goodbye!